And we're back. Today's episode is going to be for people that are editing their own podcasts, or if you've outsourced to an editor. Essentially, what I want to do is try to attempt to answer the age-old question that I get a lot, which is, should I be editing out every single little thing from my podcast? Now, there's different things that you will edit in a given podcast episode. Uhs, those are called crutch words. That's totally your prerogative. We will talk about those in a second. The big things that you do want to edit out. Bathroom breaks. Obviously, when people need to stop and go take a pee, obviously you want to edit that out. Any kind of long break where there's either an awkward lull in the conversation, maybe there's 10 or 12 seconds while you're coming up with your next question, or your guest is taking their time. Is this sticking out weird? Does that look weird? Or their guest is taking their time answering a question and there's 5 or 6 seconds. You want to trim that down. Obviously, you don't want it to be question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. That might be a little too close of cuts, but if there is elongated, what they call in the radio industry, dead air, you want to cut all that out. And just by cutting out those little breaks and those sort of long pauses in between questions and answers, that can cut down on the podcast time significantly. And from a listener perspective, we are in an age where literally everything is fighting for your attention. Even you just watching this video, you could be bored like that and decide to switch on to the next thing. There's texts, there's DMs, Snapchat, Instagram messages, their Instagram feed, Twitter, TikTok, everything is fighting for your attention. So from a listener perspective, if you're looking at either a 52-minute podcast or a 36-minute podcast based on the amount of edits that you have, that 36-minute podcast is going to look a lot more appealing in terms of you're getting the same amount of value, you're just cutting out the fluff, and you're getting it in a less amount of time. Now, from the host perspective, when it comes to the crutch words, we're talking things like that, words that are not necessarily of value to the overall conversation to your podcast. That's totally your prerogative. I've heard basically both cases. Some hosts will come to me and say, hey, I want you to cut out everything, which is totally fine. That makes things a lot smoother. The key is if you can hide those edits well. You need to have, and all of that just takes practice, being able to fade in and out and really hide those edits as if they never occurred in an audio podcast. That takes practice, and it does tighten up the conversation a little bit. But an and an or a every now and again, it's not the end of the world. Your listener is not going to go, you know what, this guy says way too much. There are instances where a guest or even a host as well say like crazy. And if they are one of those people, then yeah, you got to go in there and snip at least. I think a good rule of thumb is about 75 to 80% of those get them out of there. You will come across guests every now and again that are just crazy crutch word machines. They just cannot get it together and form a coherent thought without a bunch of in there. And in that case, unfortunately, you got to go in there and snip those out, because you as the listener, when it gets to be too much, and it can just be distracting as a listener. So ultimately, when it comes to the crutch words, that's up to your discretion. But again, the really big things that you do want to edit out are any kind of breaks or even confidential material that the guest may have said without really thinking. And on sort of a second listen through, they decide, I kind of wish I hadn't said that. Let's edit that out. You want to be courteous to your guests as well. But ultimately, you don't need to drive yourself crazy and spend tens of hours on a podcast episode just editing out every single little thing. I promise you it's going to be okay. However, like I said, there are certain use cases where it would benefit you to actually edit out a lot of those things. So again, this is going to be on an episode by episode basis. And once you get into sort of the flow of producing episodes, you will sort of get your rhythm. You'll get your cadence of how you like to edit things and how you like yourself to sound from a hosting standpoint. So I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, follow the channel on YouTube, and I will see you next week.